Hi, I'm Mark Wybrow and this is the Electronic Cafe, the channel for the lovers of electronic music.
Hello, and I'm Andy McNabb, and for the first time in 2022, let's get started. So welcome to this, our very first episode for the new year. Happy New Year to everyone. What an incredible year it was for the Electronic Cafe last year. Massive growth, incredible artists, great support. We introduced the awards that are going down really well in the industry. So, it's fantastic. And trust me, we're hoping to make some really big announcements soon. So it's worth sticking around for all the best music that's out there that you just don't really see hearing on the radios, etc. This is a place for the best, coolest music anywhere. And as I say, we'll make some great announcements soon. In this particular episode, we are focusing on Depeche Mode and the early stages of their career. And because they are arguably one of the biggest bands of all time, we've kind of even we've looked at Tears for Fears, Gary Newman. Depeche Mode hasn't eluded us. We just thought, how do you talk about one of the greatest, biggest bands? And we had to do it at some point. So we're going to look at the first part of Depeche, how they formed. Mark and I have got true life experience of that because we were in the same area and kind of grew up with them. So we can share some of that experience with you because it's pretty cool. And then we're going to look at some new albums in our Hot Stuff section. So, great show to start the new year. One of the biggest bands of all time. So sit back and check out mine and Mark's views about the incredible Depeche Mode. So where do you start with a band as bloody big as Depeche Mode, right? So I guess the beginning is obviously the right place. Real quick potted history at the beginning. Come from Basildon, Essex, about 10 miles from where I live. They formed in 1980. They've done all right. They've 54 songs in the UK singles charts. I think 17 top 10 albums in the UK album charts. Sold over 100 million albums worldwide. Q magazine ranked them as one of the bands or the top 50 bands that changed the world. VH1 ranked them as one of the 100 most greatest artists of all time. They've been nominated and inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, to say that they're big is an understatement. They are bloody massive. But rewinding right back to when it all started, Vince Clarke and Fletch had a band called Composition of Sound with Clarke on vocals and guitar and Fletch on bass. Love to have seen Fletch on a bass. That'd be pretty cool. Why don't they do it on the tours? But soon after that formation of the band, this Composition of Sound, Vince heard OMD, and that changed everything. He then decided they wanted to be an electronic band. So they were doing odd jobs and saving as much money as they can to buy synths or borrowing them for friends. And they were soon joined by Martin Gore, so they became a threesome. Fletcher's listed that OMD Cure, Susan the Banshees, Kraftwerk, the Human League as kind of key influences for the trio, three men. Dave joined a little bit later, Dave Gahan, when Vince heard him perform at a local Scat Hut jam session singing a rendition of Bowie's Heroes, which is quite ironic because that was a really poignant moment for me in the last tour when he sang that song out of respect for the great Mr. Bowie. Gahan and Gore's favourite artists at that time were the Banshees, Sparks, Cabaret Voltaire, Talking Heads, Iggy Pop. Gahan's persona was very much influenced by the front man of the Damned, Dave Vanian, but he also cites Bowie, Prince, Presley and James Brown as influences to his stage persona, and you can see bits of that. In terms of the name, when they were explaining the choice for the new name from going from this composition of sounds to Depeche Mode, I remember this actually, I remember reading about it. Martin Gore said it just meant hurried fashion or fashion dispatch, and he said, I like the sound of that. But the right translation of the magazine's name, and hence the band's, is Fashion News or Fashion Update. The first gig they ever did was at a school in May 1980 called the James Hornsby School in Billericay, in Basildon. Apparently there is a plaque commemorating the gig, and that's where Gore and Fletcher were pupils. The band made their recording debut on the now legendary Some Bizarre album with Photographic, an album Mark and I spoke about in a very early episode of the EC. That was a game-changing album. I say the track was later re-recorded for their debut album Speak and Spell, which Mark is going to talk about a bit later on. They did have a demo tape to take around to the record companies, but they would demand the companies play it there and then, and Gahan sort of said most of the record A&R men would tell them to fuck off, and they'd say leave the tape with us, and Depeche would say it's the only one we've got, wave goodbye and go somewhere else. But then prior to securing their record contract with Miller's Mute, they were offered offers from all the major labels. Phonogram offered them money you could never imagine, and all sorts of things like clove allowances. But it was when they were playing a live gig at the Bridge House in Canning Town, and the band was approached by Miller, and obviously the founder of Mute Records. They recorded Dreaming of Me in December of 1980, and it was released in 81, and it reached 57, which created some encouragement. Then New Life came out. What a great song. Climbed to number 11 in the UK charts and got them their first appearance on Top of the Pops, which I do remember. The band actually went to London for that event on train, carrying a Simps, all the way to the BBC studios. And this was the start of their world domination. I was lucky enough to be around at that time, and as Mark was, and I saw them play at Raquel's in Basildon, the Regency Suite in Chadwell Heath, Crocs in Radley. I was at the legendary All Day hosted by Rusty Egan at Flicks in Dartford. I saw Vince Clarke's last gig with them at the Lyceum, because you can see the size of the venues are growing fast, being supported by the incredible Blancmange. And I've pretty much seen every tour ever since. So although I don't publicly talk about I'm a massive Depeche Mode fan, I am a massive Depeche Mode fan. I think the standout tour for me has probably been Violator at Wembley. But let's look at the first two albums that caught fire pretty quickly and sort of really sowed the seeds of their huge rise to being global superstars.
We grew up in a town called Upminster in Essex, and Depeche Mode lived pretty much in the next town to us called Basildon. We saw them numerous times in the early days in tiny venues like Crocs nightclub in Rayleigh and Raquel's nightclub in Basildon before they were even signed, and it was common to also bump into them on the trains to and from London, and we have lots of memories of those great times. What I'm trying to say is there was a lot happening even before Speak and Spell, culminating in an early version of the song Photographic appearing on the now legendary Some Bizarre compilation album.
Oh, White House, oh, White Room, the program of today. Light on, switch on, your eyes are far away. The map represents you and the tape is your voice. Follow all along you till you recognize the joys.
The Some Bizarre album was a legendary compilation album released in early 1981, and it featured bands like Depeche Mode, The, Blancmange, B-Movie and Soft Cell. It was a sampler album featuring all of these artists all before any of them were signed. If you don't know this album, you really need to track it down and check it out. One of our very early Electronic Cafe episodes, number 3 I think, was about this pivotal album. Whereas the song Photographic appeared later on Speak and Spell, it was a very different re-recorded slower version, and personally I love the faster Some Bizarre version. In 1981, Depeche Mode released their debut single on Mute Records, Dreaming of Me, which preceded the release of Speak and Spell.
Light switch, man switch, film was broken only then. All night, views tomorrow, dancing with a distant friend, filming and screening a picture.
Speak and Spell was released in October 1981. Strangely, the original album didn't include the single Dreaming of Me, but on later reissues it was included. Having seen them live a number of times before its release, I was also surprised that a number of the songs within their live show didn't appear on the album too. Songs like the brilliant Television Set.
Under the mask of communication, I tell what everyone finds. Do you know my appearance is changing? Changing from mine and I just television set.
Speak and Spell was the only album with the original four members of Depeche Mode: Vince Clarke, Martin Gore, Dave Gahan and Andy Fletcher. It was released on Mute Records and produced by Depeche Mode and Daniel Miller. The album was a more electro-pop sound and feel to what Depeche Mode later became, and it contained two further hit singles, New Life and Just Can't Get Enough, which really put the band on the map.
I stand still stepping on a shady street and I watch that man to a stranger. Think you only know me when you turn on the light. Now the room is lit with danger. Complicating, circulating, new life, operating, generating, new life, new life. When I'm with you, baby, I go out of my head, and I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough. All the things you do to me and everything you said, I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough. We slip and slide as we fall in love, and I just can't.
The album reached number 10 in the UK charts and generally received favourable reception from the critics, who admired the smart simplicity and catchy melodies. However, the dark clouds were already forming, and it was the only album to feature lead songwriter Vince Clarke, who left the band around this time of its release.
It is relentless. You think you're in control, but you don't know me, babe. I can move you, I can soothe you, I can take you places in a different way. I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. I'll be your operator, baby. I'm in control. And I'm looking to the day. I'm mesmerized a lot. The years I spent just thinking of the moment we both knew. A second boss looking into, it seems it can't be true.
They were raining from the sky, exploding in my heart. Is this the love in disguise, or just a form of modern art? From the skies you could almost see the cry.
Strangely, by the band's own admission, they weren't too concerned about losing their main songwriter Vince Clarke, and they have put this down to perhaps overconfidence and the naivety of youth. Others around the band nonetheless were concerned about it all ending before it even really began.
They're starting their massive rise to fame, released an amazing first album, and their main songwriter leaves. In '82, the band released "See You," their first single without Vince, which managed to beat all of his pen singles in the UK charts, reaching number 6.
All I wanna do is see you again. Is that too much to ask for? I just wanna see your sweet smile, smile the way it was before. When I try not to hold you and I try not to kiss you, and I won't even touch you. All I wanna do is see you. Don't you know?
I think what happened then, I think Alan Wilder had joined the band after a few auditions. They went to North America and then they released 2 singles ahead of this masterpiece, Broken Frame. But at the time, Daniel Miller told Wilder that he wasn't needed for the recording of this album, as the 3 guys just wanted to prove that they could succeed without Vince.
I had been in and out of several bands in the period leading up to my joining. At that time, I was just sort of looking around for another job, something that was going to pay the wages. And there was this advert in the Melody Maker, and I kind of almost knew who it was immediately, even though it didn't say from the advert, because I'd just read somewhere the week before that they'd lost a member. And I thought, oh, it's probably Depeche Mode, you know, even though I didn't know that much about them at the time.
We auditioned at Blackwing, usual, and all these, you know, strange and wonderful characters showed up, and they were all, you know, dressed up to the nines but couldn't play. And then Al came along and could play anything. We thought we'd really get him by like asking him to play like a, you know, a bass line and a melody at the same time, and you know, he did it, and we were like, wow, this guy's like amazing.
When I went to the initial audition, it did seem very simple what they were asking me to do, you know, very simple one-line tunes and a bit of backing vocal. But apparently many people had struggled to do that, and I didn't.
And I think they were a bit intimidated by him as well, because he was such a good keyboard player. You know, they were struggling playing the notes. He was just kind of, you know, reading the newspaper and playing at the same time.
Secret gardens, not so secret anymore. No, my secret garden.
So he was in, and I think we paid him some ridiculous, something like 100 quid a week or something. You know, we gave him 100 quid a week for like the first couple of years, till he finally turned around and was like, you know, am I in the band?
So this album was released in September, and the following month the band began their '82 tour. There was a non-album single, Get the Balance Right, which obviously you'll remember, was released in January 1983, and the first Depeche Mode track to be recorded with Alan. This Gorehound album was a pretty patchy, tentative document, but its single signposted the way forward. I think See You, The Meaning of Love were bright as button pop gems. But for me, it was the brooding leaving silence that really hinted towards the gothic sort of electro monsters Depeche Mode were about to become.
I've read more than 100 books, seen love mentioned many thousand times, but despite all the places I've looked, it's still no clearer, it's just not enough. I'm still no nearer the meaning of love.
Can I say
I don't wanna play.
anymore? What can I say? I'm heading for the door.
I can't stand this emotional violence.
Leaving silence. Leaving silence.
My feelings at the time mirrored the band's. Martin Gore was prepared to step up as the main songwriter, and Martin had written 3 songs on the Speak and Spell album after all. He wrote Tora Tora Tora, Big Muff and Any Second Now.
The addiction, excesses and dark experiences that were almost going to kill the band were years down the line. For now, this is prim, pert and prettily packaged. Here are their original songs of innocence. with a great cover by Mr. Brian Griffin, who Mark and I were fortunate enough to meet on the set of Vaughan George's video, and what a gent he was. This is definitely worth checking out if you haven't listened to it, and it is a piece of history, or a monumental piece of history in the Depeche Mode story.
A Broken Frame was again produced by the band and Daniel Miller.
Someone will call, something will fall and smash on the floor without reading the text. Know what comes next. Seen it before, and it's painful.
Things must change. We must. What use is a souvenir of something we once had? When all it ever does is make me feel bad. I wish I could tear it up, but then again I haven't the guts. I wish I could throw it on the fire. I wish I could.
So here we are, our very first hot stuff section of the Electronic Cafe for 2022. And we're going to, as ever, try not to disappoint, but just give you stuff your ears deserve. For my first hot stuff choice isn't a particularly new album. It came out middle of last year, but I only discovered it thanks to Sven at 808.pop and Metroland. Yes, you Sven, who very kindly did a great section in our Celebrity Hot Stuff episode. And if you guys haven't seen it, check it out if you want to get some more great recommendations. But one of the albums he talked about, and one of the few I actually ended up buying, was this one. This is Morning Tsunami by the very talented Hanti. I've fallen in love with it. I had it playing on New Year's Eve. Just think it's an incredible piece of work. Hanti is the musical alter ego of a lady based in Paris called Hélène, and I don't want to do a name of misjustice. I think it's Dituri. The Hanti piece translated into English means haunts. I think it's very apt for the style of music she makes. She's been doing this since 2013, so she's based in Paris. She evokes or creates really dark wave, electro-infused dark wave that has lots of 80s, 90s feel about it, but it's got a distinctly modern sound and flair. I think any goth or dark music aficionados will find plenty to love about her. But there's a real lush, somber sound that I absolutely love. I think many of her tracks work well as standalones, some groove, some brood. Yet as a whole, there's a real nice sense of solitude and contemplation to her work. She's a very talented lady. I think the lead tracks on this album, Apnea and Blank Love, they sound a bit harder and grittier than previous Hanti works. Helen herself says the new album was driven by a wave of emotions, and I think she's always poured plenty of those into her previous work, to be honest. You can hear it, but she says she went even deeper with this album. She's also integrated new plugins and virtual synths to fashion a more electronic, less dark wave concoction that really superbly blends both styles. Let's say our good friend Sven from 808.pop, called this out, and he was the reason I bought this, and I'm glad I did. So Sven, thank you, mate. I owe you. This is a great album. If you guys haven't checked this out yet, please do. It's the incredible Morning Tsunami by the very talented Hanti. And my second hot stuff recommendation is the newly released fabulous Signals by the brilliant Marconi Union. They've been honing their electronic voice way back since 2003. The last few albums had a bit more of a deep ambience feel about them, so Dead Air, Tokyo Plus and Ghost Stations. But they've really hit the groove again on this album, Signals. They look to a more rhythm-driven sound. Apparently it's been inspired by drummers like Jackie Libzit of Can, Nigerian drummer Tony Allen of Fela Kuti's Africa 70 and Clive Deemer, who's played drums with Hawkwind, Radiohead, Portishead and many others. Apparently it's his spirit, if not the actual drummers, who inspired the mostly deep-set grooves of Signals. There's some great space in this album as well, I've noticed. I think Duncan Meadows gets a lot more of that, navigating the jazzier grooves of track Halo with like a really cool electric piano solo. Blowback is a much heavier sort of beat-like track, one of the darker tracks I think Marconi Union's recorded. It's got a snarling synth bass. It makes you feel like you've been stalked on a Blade Runner back alley. But somehow they managed to still drop an earth-real female Quarantist menacing track. They play with much more dynamics on this album. And, they use the groove to take them to a textured layered world that rewards deep and loud listening. I just think this puts them back in front of terms of where they were in their early stuff. It really has gone full circle and brought them back to the fore. I think Marconi Union have really re-established themselves as a leading light of forward-moving, clear-thinking, cool-thinking electronic music. So check this out. It's a brilliant piece of work. So that's it, our first episode of 2022 for the Electronic Cafe. I hope you liked Mark and I's dive into the history of Depeche Mode and their early albums, and you're loving the hot stuff music that we're recommending for you. As I say, there's lots of good things coming. We've got some great announcements to make. Stick with us. Thank you for watching, and Mark and I look forward to seeing you all on the Electronic Cafe very soon. Take care and bye-bye for now.
Thanks for watching the Electronic Cafe, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.